The general housekeeping rules. I would like to request that everyone keep their speakers on mute throughout, and no questions will be allowed during the presentation, but you are very welcome to pop it into the chat box and it will be addressed afterwards. So today's presentation is a bit different to the others that you are used to. So our presenter will do a 30-minute presentation, and that will be followed by a 20-minute question and discussion session. We will start by doing a study update, and that will be done by Professor Graham Mankies, who you all know by now is also the ViiV Steering Committee Chairman. That'll be followed by an introduction to our speaker of the day, Dr. Max Lataillade, on HIV drug development, and a recording of this webinar will be shared hereafter, and I encourage you all to pop your email in the chat box would you want to receive this. So over to you, Prof. Mankies.
Thanks very much, Elsa, and also just to say welcome to colleagues attending this webinar this afternoon. As we usually do in the ViiV webinars, we give a very brief introduction to the ViiV trial and then an update on progress. And the reason being that not everyone joining is involved in the ViiV trial. We extend the invitations widely. And so we just want to make sure that everybody is aware of the ViiV trial, and then give the progress update, as I said. So the ViiV trial is led in a partnership between Population Health Research Institute in Canada and University of Cape Town in South Africa, funded by the Gates Foundation, and is a pragmatic, multi-center, double-blinded, placebo-controlled, randomized controlled trial that asks the question that among patients with advanced HIV and a CD4 count of less than 100, either starting antiretroviral therapy or reinitiating antiretroviral therapy after an interruption, so patients with advanced HIV disease with a CD4 of less than 100, does 4 weeks of treatment with azithromycin at 250 milligrams once daily, compared to receiving placebo, reduce mortality at 24 weeks of follow-up. So we hypothesize that azithromycin prophylaxis against common bacterial infections will improve survival among patients with advanced HIV disease when added to standard of care when they start antiretroviral therapy or restart antiretroviral therapy. And you can just see the schema there. It's the trial is enrolling adult patients over 18 years of age, CD4 of less than 100, not with a current acute illness. If they've got an acute illness, that needs to be addressed first. And then starting ART or restarting ART randomized to either placebo or azithromycin, and then followed up to the primary endpoint at 6 months, and then an additional follow-up to 12 months for the secondary outcomes. So that's the outline of the trial. Next slide, please. In terms of the countries, as many of you are aware, that we plan to enroll 8,000 participants that will lead to an adequately powered trial. And we plan to do this over 14 countries. And out of those countries, 10 of those are currently activated in green. And we'd just like to acknowledge Mozambique as the latest country to activate and welcome them on board among the activated countries. And you can see the 10 activated countries, and then Ethiopia, Republic of Congo, Tanzania, and Kenya are still awaiting activation and they're in the process of preparation for participating in the trial. So there are a planned 62 sites across the 14 countries, and currently 46 of those are activated and recruiting participants. Next slide. And this slide really summarizes progress to date. So as I said, the plan is to recruit 8,000 participants to the trial in total across the countries participating. And we've currently enrolled 2,736 participants and 189 in the last 1 month. Our target is to enroll over 200 participants a month to be able to end recruitment according in the targeted time period. And as many of you will have seen in previous webinars, we were achieving up to around 280 participants per month. It has obviously dropped down, but we're hoping that it will pick up and be sustained above 200 to meet our target. So, this 2,700 participants really reflects enrollment across all of the countries involved in Revive. And you can see in the fifth column there, the participants that have been enrolled in each country cumulatively over the time period. So, major achievement to date in terms of, keeping up with our target. And the last slide really summarizes that graphically. If you can just go on to that. You can see that, the target is to end enrollment by the December 2027. And to meet that target, we need to stick at the light blue line. Purple is the achieved enrollment, and we're right on target at the moment in terms of our keeping pace with target enrollment. So congratulations to all of the sites. And I will now hand back to Elsa, but before doing that, to just say a very big thank you to Dr. Lataillade on behalf of the Trial Steering Committee for participating and giving the talk on today's webinar, and really looking forward to hearing the update on HIV drug development that's going to be shared. So thank you very much on behalf of the Trial Steering Committee, and back to you, Elsa.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mankies. It is a privilege to introduce today's distinguished speaker, Dr. Max Lataillade, the internationally respected head of drug development at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where he leads global strategies to deliver scalable and equitable HIV treatment and prevention solutions to underserved communities. He's also president of Health and Pharma Solutions and senior vice president and head of clinical development at Cytodyn, where he continues to influence innovation in oncology, immunotherapy, and infectious disease programs. Beyond his executive leadership, Dr. Lataillade remains actively involved in clinical care and teaching as an assistant professor at Yale School of Medicine. He is deeply committed to global health equity, particularly through advocacy in minority communities and support for health initiatives in Haiti. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Lataillade.
Good morning, Elsa, and good morning, Graham. It's a great honor to be here, and thanks for the invite. And I was in Johannesburg 2 weeks ago, so next time, if we plan well, I can be in Cape Town. Who refuses a visit to Cape Town? Nobody I know in the world, right? And so I would be glad to be on site and meeting with you guys as well, and discussing new studies. So what I would like to do today is really to share with you what I've been doing since I joined the Gates Foundation. I joined the Gates Foundation after a long career in pharma, both at Bristol-Myers Squibb, where I actually ran the pediatric atazanavir and efavirenz trial in South Africa. I remember quite a few patients recruited from Bloemfontein and Durban as well as Pretoria and Johannesburg. Then also helped a team and led a team to cure hepatitis C with 2 small molecules at Bristol-Myers Squibb. And then the rest of my work on HIV really was done at ViiV Healthcare, a company that is owned by Glaxo, Pfizer, and Shinogi, but focused 100% on HIV, especially developing my favorite drug, Fostemsavir. I worked on this drug for 10 years. For heavily treatment experience. I worked closely with Dr. Ghulam Latif from Durban to actually get this drug approved. It was so close to me, this drug. I tried to call it Maxivir, but they didn't want to at the end, right? So, but clearly, my latest work has been on long-acting antiretroviral agents, helped develop longer version of cabotegravir, longer version of the capsid program at ViiV Healthcare. I was overseeing R&D, especially for the pipeline. And so that gave me a great experience and sort of leadership and expertise in long-acting injectables, not only from a development perspective, which I love, but from a manufacturing perspective, a CMC perspective, drug supply perspective. And so now at the Gates Foundation, I'm really here to see how we can implement and deliver long-acting innovation to LMICs and how to best do it with our partners in LMICs. So let me share with you my presentation, and then we can start from there. Share. And then I'm going to put it in the presentation mode. Can you guys see this?
Yes, doctor.
Perfect, perfect. And so really, this is going to be me sharing with you guys where we are at the Gates Foundation, and also where the next level of innovation is going to come from, next grants or next ideas for your trial, and so we can discuss it at the end. I like a lot of questions, and I like to have a discussion on things. So I'll present for about maybe 25, 30 minutes, no more than that. And then we can actually talk to each other. Is that okay?
That's perfect.
All right. And so my first slide is really always remembering why we are here, right? If you think about 2023, we were still getting about 1.3 million infections a year. We're talking about 4,000 people infected every day. Even though I worked on 2 drug regimens, even though I worked on long-acting injectables, even though we have good regimens that are sitting in the 90% range, we're still dealing with a lot more stigma than I would like and a lot more diagnosis. Even in the United States, guys, we're still getting 30,000 infections a year, most of them sitting in the South, in African American people, in African American women. I've talked to the Biden administration in the past when I was at ViiV and government officials to actually address this issue in the South. Next, access and prevention. We're seeing less and less access now, and we'll see less and less prevention, given how the US administration now has focused on only funding local research and not global research, especially on HIV. There's been quite a bit of chatter as far as many more thousands of infections expected in LMICs due to lack of funding, right? So I think instead of less access and less prevention, we need more access and more prevention. And last but not least, I think that there's going to be more in terms of innovation in self-administration and also in long-acting injectables. So if you look at this slide, it kind of shows you how well we are not doing. And people are always talking about reaching, 90, 90, 90. But when you think about what we are looking at here, we're still getting about 120,000 children, and half of these infections are sitting in women, right? And so we are still not doing as well as we should be doing. 630,000 age-related death. That was in 2023. If you think about this slide, and that was from one of your colleagues, Linda Gail Baker, and when you look at the projections of people living with HIV in 2030 and 2050, you could see that everything stays the same. You're looking at anywhere between 29 to 46 million people living with HIV. And if you think about where we are and where we should be, there's a gap of about 500,000 cases that shows you that we're not going to meet our targets of 90, 90, 90 or 95, 95, 95 by 2030. In fact, you potentially can get worse as far as the number of new infections. So that was really to set the stage as far as a background of where we are now. Now let's talk about what's happening in the current competitive landscape in terms of what new research is happening in pharma. So the pharmaceutical companies are moving forward toward long-acting. There's been an inflection point and a paradigm shift both. I was part of the inflection point in switching from once a day to once a week or long-acting injectables. And then the paradigm shift is that none of the big pharma companies are actually working on once-a-day drug anymore. Everybody's working on once a week, once a month, once every 6 months, and potentially once a year. So let me give you a little insight in terms of pharma companies and what's happening. If you took my summary here to know what's happening in Gilead, ViiV, and Merck, you'll see that Gilead is focusing on Q6 months PrEP. They just got approval for Lent on June 19 or June 18. Yearly dosing for PrEP. And then they're working on once a week, once a month, once every 3 months, and once 6 months partners for lenacapavir. For ViiV, it's really about extending CAP 200 to CAP 400 extended release to Q4 months. And then for Merck, it's about how do we develop long-acting orals to solve LMIC issues. So to think about Gilead, let's focus on Gilead for a moment. Gilead's strategy is capsid at the core. With capsid at the core, they're also developing a pro-drug of lenacapavir and a long-acting version of lenacapavir in terms of pro-drug. But their partners could be BNAB and RTTI, which they're developing a weekly with Merck, and also they have a really big research programs on integrase strength transfer inhibitors. I can tell you, I've helped develop multiple integrase inhibitors, and it doesn't seem like it's not easy to get them to long-acting, right? Because whenever you're talking about long-acting, you need quite a bit of potency in the discovery stage. So broadly, their strategy, treatment versus prep, is to really focus on injectable twice yearly, monthly, weekly, and quarterly. On the prep side, it's really moving toward yearly. If you think about where they're headed, that strategy shows you here that in 28, 27, 29, and 2031, this is when their innovation is going to come through. But from a long-acting perspective, one has to say that Cabenuva, whether it's 2 months or Q4 months, or every 4 months, will be the regimen that is still going to be standard of care for long-acting patients for the next few years, because you need a partner every 6 months to match with lenacapavir in a sense, given that we would want synchronous dosing. If you focus now on what ViiV is doing, as I said, at ViiV, the strategy is different. It's integrase at the core. When I was at ViiV, I was a global research strategy, and for 6 years. And the integrase at the core is important because you need a strong, durable, high genetic barrier drug at the center. The partner can actually be a lesser potent drug. As you can see in Dovato, dolutegravir 3TC, 3TC used to be like a very weak drug with a lot of, sort of resistance to 3TC. But because the partner in dolutegravir was so strong, you nearly didn't see any resistance with 3TC anymore. So clearly at the core, you need a strong, genetic barrier drug. And around that is really looking for other agents to pair with the cabotegravir. At Merck, the strategy is NRTTI at the core, and whether it's islatravir or MK-8527, the backup, I'm sure you guys know that the Gates Foundation is working with Merck on MK-8527, which is an oral monthly drug. It's really focusing on weekly oral, monthly oral, and I think if you look at monthly oral drug, I feel deeply that it could have a major impact in LMICs. So now that you guys are total expert, and this is here looking at Merck in terms of how they see the world in the future, you could see a lot of oral sort of regimen, especially long-acting. So now that you are all expert in terms of the competitive landscape, so when I joined the Gates Foundation, looking at the landscape and the paradigm shift and the inflection point, I said, well, my first role as head of the research and development, head of development for HIV drugs at the Gates Foundation, we really needed to upgrade our target product profiles. What sort of drugs are we going to look at? And also upgrade our target medicine profile. So it took us a couple of months, but I'm going to summarize it for you in a couple of slides. So number one, where we are focusing as far as our target product profiles. And remember, guys, target product profiles focus on the characteristics of the asset. So if I want an asset that has my characteristics, I have to go back to discovery and say, I want you guys to discover this asset with this chemical profile, right? And so from the long-acting oral, we want assets that can be good for treatment, prep, or PEP. Long-acting injectable, really for treatment and prep. And then I was that close to moving away from implants. And I met somebody who's working on an implant where with islatravir especially, when he looked at potentially how long islatravir can work in the implant, we were talking about 4 years, right? So if you really had an implant every 4 years, it could be cost effective in LMICs in terms of controlling a new infection in one place or pandemics in another sort of a specific environment. So we kept implant as far as our target product profiles for now. Now let's move to target medicine profiles. As you know, when you go to TMP, you're really talking about the characteristics of the assets going into the patient, right? the treatment paradigm. So here, for treatment, if you look at the different columns, you have long-acting oral, right? Which is an oral two-drug regimen fixed-dose combination. That's coming in soon, in 27, 28, with the combination of lenacapavir and islatravir. Ideal would be a monthly oral two-drug regimen. And there are some components, both at Gilead and Merck, where we could get there. From long-acting injectable, we're really talking about every 6 months two-drug regimen, whether it's sub-Q or IM. Whether it be ideal or not to have a yearly treatment regimen, we have to wait and see. And last but not least, for implant, at least every 2 years, because with lenacapavir getting to once a year, nobody should be putting an implant in somebody for a year. I think that it should be every 2 to 4 years. From a breast perspective, you see once monthly oral, we're working with Merck on that, once every 6 months versus once a year, and then the implant every 4 years. On the PEP side, I think this is where I'm going to be entertaining more grants and more ideas, because usually in LMIC, like when I've been to South Africa, the same TLD that you use for treatment, you use it for PEP as well. So it's an on-demand situation. You don't have to stock up for PEP. However, if you could have a one pill orally for 1 month for PrEP, and you could give that single pill once for PEP, then you would have solved the compliance issues for PEP in terms of taking the drug for 28 days, right? So, I think those are where we see our target medicine profiles in the future. So when you have a TPP and TMP, it always translates into what's next and when are we going to have those assets. And those are timelines that are not set in stone. They could change, but we are in the ballpark when those things will be available. Cabotegravir every 2 months, the generic, maybe in 27. Cab Q4, which is extended release, because it's going to be a PKPD sort of bridging. We're talking about here 26, 27. Q6 months generic for Len in 27 or so. Once a year for Gilead for Len, a similar range of 26, 27. Again, this is going to be a PKPD study, although you're moving from sub-Q to IM. And then the Merck monthly program in 27 or so. So you could see where you're going to have a lot of potential implementation programs for prevention in LMICs. And I think with long-acting injectables, we really have a strong chance here to stifle the HIV epidemic if we have the right implementation strategies. Next, let's look at what's available for treatment. Again, not set in stone in terms of when they'll deliver, but in the ballpark. You can see that with long-acting injectables, you're looking at, every 3 months, every 6 months potential in the 2031 potential or so, right? And at the bottom, and before I move to the bottom, you can see Rukobia, which is a drug that I helped develop there. And I like this drug quite a bit. It's a prodrug of cabotegravir. And I think this drug could potentially go once every 6 months or easily once a year, right? And so you could see that potential partners that could get together if in the right setting to impact global treatment and also potentially every 6 months to a year. At the bottom, you can see the oral regimen, lenacapavir and islatravir. I think this will be upon us in 27, they're in phase 3. This regimen here is the one that's on clinical hold now. The 4182 and the 1720. The 1720 is an integrase inhibitor. So we have to, wait and see what happened there. But that would be a weekly regimen from Gilead. Merck is working on their own weekly regimen in islatravir and ulonivirine, which is an NLRTI. And then I like that quite a bit, the last one, a monthly potential oral regimen. There, I can tell you that it will be hard to get a fixed dose combination. Potentially, you'll have 1 to 2 pills once a month. However, instead of taking a pill every day for 365 days, you could take 24 pills total a year, right? And so I see, I like this sort of research strategy going on there and development strategy. So let me give you the way I'm thinking about things and the way I'm presenting things internally. You probably heard maybe a month and a half back that Bill Gates has said that within 20 years, the foundation will cease to exist. So within that 20 years, we feel internally that we have to choose programs that are going to have the most impact in LMICs. So if you could think about a core strategy that looks like monthly pill for treatment, monthly pill for PrEP, and one pill for PEP, we would have simplified treatment, PrEP, and PEP significantly, right? Because basically it becomes an oral pill for once a month for everything. And if you think about the complexities of injectables versus oral, I think it might be quite cost effective to have a monthly strategy. Alternatively, you could see that we would support a bi-yearly long-acting injectable, a 1 to 2 annual injection with length for PrEP, and as well for PEP. Where I can see the implant coming along, you could have actually an implant in suppressed patient for 4 years with 2 drugs, because that implant we are working on look as about 2 chambers. So basically, I think this is the way I'm thinking about, and where we at the foundation think we are headed next. Certainly, there's much more to be discussed within the foundation. You could see that it's called an emerging strategic visions, but I'm sharing this with you guys. Last but not least, the way I think about moving in the future is think about our current state now. Near term, I think we could be, if we had a once-a-week regimen, moving from 365 pills to 1 pill per week, down to 12 pills a year, right? If you had a 1 pill once a month, could be 12 to 24. For PrEP, you could see yourself moving to 1 to 2 injections pretty quickly now, or a 1 pill per month, 12 pills per year, or a 1 injection, or a 1 pill per month. And then last but not least, if that 1 pill per month from Merck could be applied as well to PEP, you could just have like 1 pill per exposure, and this would be the way you deal with at-risk contacts that are non-exposures from a healthcare perspective. So that's a kind of a simplified way of looking at things, and a way for myself to present it to the senior leadership within Gates, right? The Gates Foundation, in terms of how we could influence treatment, PrEP, and PEP in LMICs. So I will finish by sharing with you what I think about and why I joined the Gates Foundation is really to end the HIV epidemic, because I really enjoy drug development in pharma. I really like the idea of developing something from scratch and bringing it to patient. But I do feel that we need better implementation strategies. And I feel implementation strategies that are interconnected. So there was this presentation, it was a CBS News, summary of what could happen with this decrease in funding toward PEPFAR and USAID and the Global Fund. We're talking about maybe 5 to 10 more million cases of people with HIV, and just about maybe 3 million of people dying of HIV-related deaths. So all the progress we've made, we could go way back, right? And that's why, in the title, I say the global HIV and AIDS challenges are about to get even more challenging, using challenges twice, right? And that's how much I feel we are going to deal with a rebound potentially in HIV cases. So the way I think about it is really to bring in an integrated strategy where you don't use PrEP by itself or treatment by itself, or, you got to integrate things together, right? And so first one is really to bring diagnosing. I'm talking about very intense diagnosing strategies in hot zones. For example, in South Africa, you can think about where you have areas of high incidence. Increased diagnosing means you have more of a chance to get these people on treatment. Then either using long-acting oral or injectable, or to save money, we could use TLD to help control cost. But if you get those people under control within 6 months, you're dealing with the U equals U situation, right? And prevents further transmission. But the fourth leg, I feel, that has been neglected a bit as far as putting it into the blender is really the prevention part. You have to use this thing together as a strategy. And so, for example, let's say, we chose maybe a couple of countries in Africa, and let's say we chose areas of high incidence within South Africa and brought the model together. I'm really looking now, is this model going to be cost effective? And within 3 years, potentially, of using a drug that's 100% effective at preventing HIV, with diagnosing those with HIV, with treating them and getting undetectable, I think could stifle the HIV epidemic, in those areas of high incidence and really decrease the number of new infections every year. And so when I think about it, is an interconnected strategy, right? It's not one or the other, because that one or the other is not going to work properly. So the way I think about it is the strategy that I've been thinking about for a while, that I was thinking about it at ViiV, but I know it's not an original name, but I call it the Lataillade Integrated Global Strategy to end the HIV epidemic, is really to bring HIV to zero, right? And that, to me, is the way we should be approaching any sort of new implementation strategy. I'll finish by saying that, 3 months ago, I was in Uganda evaluating new clinical trial sites for the MK8527 trial. And I was quite unprepared because, after the site visit, they took me to a gold mine community village. As you can see, I'm wearing a suit, right? A jacket, so not prepared at all. But when I got there and I was walking through this area, quite economically depressed, right? So gold mine brings men, and then there's gold brings women, and there's a category here where there's a lot of prostitution and a high HIV incidence. I have to compliment Gilead because they recruited in that environment, right, in Uganda. And suddenly this kid came and held my hand and said that when it was translated to me, that I was his older brother. And then suddenly, more kids came, and then we took a picture together. And that really, it was a powerful moment, but at the same time, quite humbling, because that's why I joined the Gates Foundation. But also, I felt quite a bit of responsibility that we have as practitioners and as colleagues to stifle the HIV transmission, stifle the HIV epidemic. And with long-acting injectables, I think we have a window that we actually could do that. And so my goal is really to prevent these children from getting HIV. So that generation, we should be able to save and prevent them from getting HIV. Anyway, I would really want to thank you for your attention and would love to get some questions from you guys. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then we can have a conversation. I think you're on mute, Elsa.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much. This was extremely powerful and encouraging. I'm going to open the floor now for discussions. It's not only questions, but also discussions. Anyone who wants to jump in. Graham.
Yeah, thanks so much, Max. That was really fantastic. An exciting talk to get that high-level perspective on what we can expect over the next 5-6 years or so in terms of drug development and what the vision is from the Gates Foundation. My question really relates to the long-acting injectables for treatment and the issue of the long tail. When things happen the way you don't want them to happen, and people don't come back for their injections. And we know that, in the current treatment, oral treatment programs, up to a quarter of people disengage, are disengaged and have been on treatment and then disengaged. And if the same thing happens with long-acting injectables, that you have the long tail, and even if you've got two drugs with similar half-lives, there won't be perfect overlap in the kind of in the decay when you're not getting frequent injections. And how are drug developers thinking about that risk of resistance in people who stop treatment and trying to mitigate that?
I think, Graham, in asking the question, you have a pretty good idea of the answer yourself, I feel. But I have to tell you that we had this concern with cabotegravir when we were doing the PrEP study, right? What we found out is that these people who did not come back for more PrEP, these people actually did not develop cabotegravir resistance, right? But if you're using carb and rilpivirine, that rilpivirine actually may end up having even a longer tail than carb, and you could potentially see yourself developing NLRTI resistance, right? And so that to me is the other side of long acting, right? So the longer we go, the longer the tail, right? So let's say you go for every 6 months regimen, your tail will be longer than if we were using like every 2 months regimen. So I do feel that like every patient, Graham, it's got to be the right patient chosen for the right regimen. And even in the United States, those patients, I still have an HIV clinic at Yale that want to switch to long acting. We choose them very carefully because those are the patients that have been coming back for 20, 30 years, that have taken their once a day regimen religiously. Those patients, I think, are good candidates for long acting injectables because they'll come back. Similarly, I think in South Africa or any LMICs, those patients that are not coming back or that you don't think are the best patients, maybe you put them on a once a month oral regimen, right? Or hopefully, my feedback has been, let's say we were looking for a once oral regimen, to have an oral regimen that is similar to TLD in the sense that the reason why when people are stop TLD cold, you don't develop any resistance is because tenofovir is the last drug to get out of your system. It protected dolutegravir and 3TC. In a monthly regimen, maybe the longer acting drug with the longer tail stays in the system longer where they would protect the other one. But I have to say that there's no magic situation or magic pill here. You probably can develop some resistance based on tail. It's about choosing the right patient and also the right combination for those patients. And I think it's one thing, Graham, that we will not be able to solve ahead of time. We're going to have to deal with this in real time.
And then, yeah, perhaps a follow-on question just about the implants.
Yes.
Is there any way of engineering the implants in such a way that you avoid having a tail, and so that you can switch off delivery at a certain point in time?
So this specific implant we are talking about, Graham, is to do exactly that. But number two, this implant is you can actually reload the material. So after 4 years, you have like two little syringes where you actually refill the material. So basically, you could see yourself. Let's say you're a young woman. Unfortunately, you were involved in some sort of like prostitution when you were 14, 15, 16. And then you were protected for 8 years. Maybe by that time you've solved your situation, or you're out of this situation. But we are thinking just that, Graham, that let's think about not having a tail. And number two, refill after 4 years for a potential like 8-year window, right? And those will be with small molecules being in the implant. We're also thinking about one drug and one contraception that could go years together in the implants. Is there two chambers? Of course, we'll have to wait and see whether with fibrosis around the implant, whether the sort of like release of the drug in tissue is going to be the same. So a lot more to come. But in pharma, I always thought that the implants always sounded better than in reality, right? There always an issue with them. But I like this one, every 4 years, there's something about it and the structure and the design of it look good to me. So we'll take a look and see how this could be implementable, if you allow me to say that, in LMICs.
Yeah.
Two good questions, Greg. Any other questions?
Elsa, are there any other questions?
I'm looking for some hands, but I don't see any.
Just encourage colleagues to ask questions, but there is one there from Katanekwa. Maybe he can unmute.
So he asked, Katanekwa, can you unmute yourself or? Okay, so let me ask the question that he's asking: how can clinical trial sites in LMICs be considered to participate in these clinical trials? Specifically with the work you are conducting, give that we have a number of clinical research sites on this call.
That's a very good question. I feel that at the Gates Foundation, we work with partners, right? So, for example, we are partnered in funding the MK-527 study, which is the oral monthly. And we have worked with Merck together, and also with the University of Washington as far as the main PI, to choose clinical trial sites all over, Africa. So this study will be in South Africa, in Uganda, and Kenya, specifically the women's study. And there's another study as well that being conducted in Africa and Latin America and Europe. So clearly, to me, the next wave of innovation, the next wave of trials is really working with us and the sponsor, which could be Merck, Gilead, or an alliance or ViiV to actually help funnel more of those studies in clinical trial sites in Africa. We are also working with the ACRN, which is the African Research Network, to actually help us with finding clinical trial sites that are suitable for our trials in Africa. So there's multiple ways to get involved and as well participate in those trials.
Thank you. And then we have Dr. Kemi. There's a question from Dr. Kemi.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. That was really it was really enlightening. I must say that looking at your strategy, the science is there, the technology is there, but when I see these strategies, it doesn't bring me any hope. I am a clinician practicing in West Africa, in Nigeria, and West Africa, I think, generally seems to be left out of the bigger trials, like Purpose, all the bigger trials. We hear all these announcements. When the lenacapavir results came out, I wasn't even excited. I just said, okay, good. I just thought to myself, good for them, because I don't see how it's going to translate into us ever getting those drugs. I feel like we're probably so many more years behind when the drugs become available. Now, if I was speaking to somebody from Pharma, I wouldn't ask this question, but because I think Pharma's job is to get the drug out and make it available. But talking to you from the Gates Foundation, I'm just wondering, can you offer any insight into how these strategies can be implemented in West Africa and other parts of Africa where our governments have not been able to match up with the kind of investments that they need to make to own the epidemic in our countries? And there are funding cuts going on right now from the US and other funders globally. So the science is nice. I think it's possible to stifle the epidemic, but not in the current climate. We're struggling with even basic things like ordinary diagnostics, with even getting the basic drugs. TLD is not a given where we are. So I just can't wrap my head around having access to these drugs and meeting these targets. Thank you.
So my question back to you is it something that is specific to Nigeria? Because we in our footprint at the foundation, I mean, beyond Pharma, right? I think that the Pharma has heard the feedback that a lot of those drugs are developed for the developed countries first, the US, Western Europe, like, to make money, and then like LMICs are an afterthought. Where we come in at the Gates Foundation when we support a program is to really require those companies to have generic readiness or a supply chain of drugs that are available to LMICs almost right away, and in a generic that's tailing this sort of number of pills or injections, within a couple of years to have generic versions of it, right? And so at the Gates Foundation, I think recently, 2 months ago, we made it a point to have the clinicians or the researchers or the scientists within the Gates Foundation that are leading the effort in LMICs to be located in LMICs, right? To lead the effort in African countries. And as I was writing it down, our footprint is in West Africa as well, especially Nigeria. So what I would ask you back is it something that is specific to Nigeria itself? Because I do feel that we would have a plan to include West Africa and Nigeria in implementation strategy?
I would say it's probably not specific to Nigeria alone. I'm having a hard time seeing us being able to get access to any of these drugs, because it just tends not to happen, and I'm just wondering whether, how, and then also even inclusion in clinical trials. It's something that most of these clinical trials done in Sub-Saharan Africa are done in Eastern and Southern Africa. ViiV is an exception, which is great, and kind of gives us a seat at the table. But I think traditionally clinical trials are conducted in Eastern and Southern Africa. And also, and I think probably the poor access to drugs or lack of access is not a Nigerian problem. It's probably an African problem, at least maybe West African problem. I can speak for that better than any other region.
So Kevin, listen, Elsa has my email, and certainly I can put it in the chat for you to give me a call, and then I can direct you to the right people in our implementation and delivery team to have a follow-up conversation with you and make sure that West Africa and Nigeria is not neglected or forgotten. And so, yeah, just send me an email and then we can have further conversation about it. I see a hand. Priscilla?
Priscilla.
Priscilla.
Yes. So this is Priscilla. I'm a pharmacist in Ghana. So I somewhat agree with Kemi, but not entirely.
Okay.
In terms of drug delivery, I think probably it's better than before from some time past. It's just that probably there's always room for improvement, but it's better than before. And especially for pediatric antiretrovirals, we are usually very concerned because there are sometimes some of the medications are particularly usually running out. But comparing it to the adult CLD, which is mostly available compared to the pediatric regimen. My other issue is with the clinical trials. I agree with her. I think West Africa probably is not usually having a lot of involvement in clinical trial compared to, as she said, the Eastern and then the Southern Africa. And probably maybe we could also get maybe one or two countries from West Africa sometimes being part of clinical trials so that we see how it also does in the western part of Africa. Thank you.
I think we hear you. It's not a Gates Foundation problem in a sense. I think when we partner with a company early on, this is something let's say we were funding the trial, right? The number one criteria is for the drug to be available at launch to our LMIC countries, right? And at the same time, for every effort to be made from a manufacturing perspective, let's say a trial is starting phase 3, and within that 3 years, from a manufacturing perspective, that they have enough doses of the asset, whether it's oral or injectable, that is available to a larger number of people. I feel that we could have another meeting where we talk about how to better implement things in West Africa versus the rest of Africa, or to the entire continent and in the LMICs we support, because I'm getting a few questions here where the innovation is not implemented as rapidly or sometimes not at all in some African countries. And I think it has to be a give and go here. It might not be entirely the manufacturer's fault. It might be government and manufacturer. It might be price. It might be negotiating price. It's something where the foundation also helps. But it might be a couple of sort of many things, as far as why it's not completely optimal. But I feel, Elsa, maybe we could have a follow-up, with the group here to talk about how to better implement studies in Africa.
But I think we'll have to book you out for 3 hours, it seems.
You gotta invite me a month in advance. I'll come down face to face.
Yes.
See, Graham is laughing here. Okay, there.
Graham had his hand up again, and then after Graham, I think you pronounce it as Brooker.
Yeah. No, I want to ask one question about the generics. After some time, generics are available for the medication. I wanted to know for the injectables, how long should we really expect that there'll be some generics so that probably it could be available in LMICs? Because I've never seen cabotegravir before since it started. I don't know. I don't know when it will ever be available. But I just want to know how long they're expecting, maybe 10 years, 5 years, or something like that, to know when something like that. Yes.
So I think in my presentation, maybe I went too fast. I think 2027, the generic for cabotegravir should be available. Also, in 2027, there are 6 different companies working on generic versions of lenacapavir every 6 months. I think Hetero is one of the companies that we have worked with that I think is ahead of others. So I would say in 2027, generics for cab and lane should be available both in LMICs from a generic perspective.
Okay, and then next, Graham said we can have Brooker go first.
I think you're still on mute.
Okay, Graham, I think you can go until he unmutes.
Okay, yeah, no, just to pick up on Kemi's point about West Africa, we really hope from the ReViiV leadership perspective that we've laid a foundation of research partnerships with West Africa, and there are now 20 sites across the 4 West African countries participating in ReViiV, and that will be a platform on which future trials work can be done, and that'll serve as a foundation. But my question, Max, was just about the once yearly lenacapavir study that was presented at CROI and published in the Lancet. It looks very exciting to me from the PK data and from the safety data, and just what do you think in terms of development and then taking that out to licensure? What is required as the next step?
Sure. Great question, Graham. I've when I worked at ViiV and Bristol-Myers Squibb, Gilead was a competitor always. And now that I'm at the Gates Foundation, they're all friends and we're all colleagues, right? And I feel like sometimes I'm the glue, right, between those 3 major companies. And I can tell you that that lenacapavir data looked very good. And that was very smart to convert it from a sub-Q to an IM, because the sub-Q volumes would be too high. Anything more than 160 sub-Q, I've noticed, even my own programs, led to too many side effects, right? And was not well tolerated. But when you change the sub-Q to IM, I think it gives you the ability to put more volume, and actually to more volume, a very potent drug equals longer duration, right? When I look at that data at CROI, you could see that they have more PK to give, right? In fact, it was that much, right, that they could actually decrease the dose by and still be above sort of the PK/PD required to actually prevent HIV for the drug in terms of concentration. So they're similar to cabotegravir going every 2 months to the extended release. It's also a PK bridging study, right? Now, the FDA may ask for more data. You know why? Because the formulation is not exactly the same. They're moving from sub-Q to IM. So even though it's the same drug, but it will have a different tolerability profile. And I think it will be better tolerated from a IM perspective, right? And if it's a yearly regimen, I feel that patients will be more forgivable. They'll probably take a week to 2 weeks pain for a yearly sort of regimen, right? And so I think the IM version is going to be better tolerated, and I feel that it's a game changer for LMICs. To me, any drug that can come in, and it shows that what we've always known, Graham, I know about you, you've been a researcher in South Africa for a long time. If patients take the drug, it works. The issue here with the lenacapavir, not issue, but what proved the case is that once you take the injectable, it's inside your body. You don't have a choice. It's inside your body. And I think once it's inside your body, I think it showed that 100% efficacy is what you should expect. So I expect the same numbers, the same sort of efficacy from the yearly perspective. And that's why I'm expecting yearly to be available in 2027 from a registrational perspective, because it's just going to be a PK bridging strategy.
Okay, excellent.
And then there's a last question. I see that Brooke is unable to unmute. There's a question from Stella saying that many thanks for an excellent presentation, which has a lot of insight. Are you planning to evaluate with PTB, given that we have a lot of individuals dying because of TB, and TB we have a lot of trials for simplifying MDR and DSTB?
So I'm part of the HIV TB, what's called PST. It's a team, you know, we all together in a sense, right? But I oversee the HIV side. There's a whole program going on with TB, especially with long-acting drugs. Especially
Sorry
with
about that.
yeah, no problem. Especially with long-acting TB drugs. I'm very excited about long-acting TB drugs. The same way we have long-acting injectable, we are evaluating a TB program where you could have long-acting TB drugs that can last up to 3 months, right? So clearly, the problem also with TB has been compliance. So what we do sometimes is that the sites that are recruiting for TB, we actually use them as well to recruit HIV studies, right? Okay. Yeah. We also use them sometimes to recruit HIV studies. But if the question is a broader question, I actually wrote about this in LinkedIn the other day, you have to have a similar strategy that is an integrated HIV TB strategy. Because in endemic TB countries, almost 50+% of people with HIV develop TB. So you have to have an integrated strategy of prophylaxis not to get TB, and also long-acting injectables to treat HIV and TB as well at the same time. So again, we can't be doing things here, here, and here. You have to be integrated.
Okay, Doctor, I think this is a sign that we are going to have to have you back, unfortunately. But thank you very much for your time, and thank you for everyone who joined. This was really insightful, and it was a pleasure and an honor to have you. We will be in contact again soon.
Listen, the pleasure was all mine, and I enjoy meeting all of you. And any sort of follow-up questions, just send it to me, and you know, we can continue this conversation. And hope to see you soon, guys.
Yes, we'll invite you. Keep well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Graham.
Bye.